movie tonight, ladies and gentlemen. So, how many Marvel comic fans, movie fans are in the room, okay? There are a few of you in here. So, how many of you remember the scene from Thor Ragnarok where Thor's trying to get in the computer and it asks for a voice code, and he goes up and he goes, Thor, and it says access denied. He goes, Thor Odin's son. He goes, access denied. He goes, God of Thunder, access denied. He goes, strongest Avenger, access denied. He goes, strongest Avenger, access denied. And so he gets mad at Iron Man and says point break, and it opens. But then you fast forward further along in the movie, and Bruce Banner comes up to the same computer. For those of you who don't know, who are illiterate and nerd, that is the Hulk. Okay? He comes up, says his name, Bruce Banner. It says, welcome, strongest Avenger. So the question of who the strongest Avenger seems to have been answered. But I have a bigger question for tonight, and I'll need some of you to help give your cases. But the real question is, who is the greatest Avenger? Okay, I believe we have some photos up here to look at. Yeah, we can choose. But show. Let me see 3 hands here real quick. I need to see a couple of hands up here. Who wants to make a case for their person? Okay. Arden, step this way for me here real quick so we can keep some semblance of social distancing here. Who is the greatest Avenger? Thor. Why is Thor the greatest Avenger? Because he's the God of Thunder? Okay. Who is over here? Eli. Is this even on? Now it's on. Who?
Cap is the best.
Captain America is the best? Why is Captain America the best?
Come on, Cap's all about morals.
Okay, it's good. He's a good guy. He is a really good guy. Okay, let's far side of the room over here. Oh, maybe I shouldn't, but...
Spider-Man is definitely the best. He's like 16 years old, and he beat up the Winter Soldier.
Okay. Those are some fair cases. I think you're all wrong. Obviously, Hawkeye is the greatest Avenger. Which is so, exactly. I think I said that earlier, and Jesse's like, he's an Avenger? So... in Luke chapter 22, okay, Jesus and the disciples, they're coming together to celebrate the Passover, the symbolic meal that the Jewish people, at least it didn't go in the bucket, Jesse. It's a meal that the Jews observed to remind themselves of God bringing them out of Egypt. And so they've come in here to celebrate it, and the first thing Jesus notices is this, that one, the disciples are arguing about who's going to sit where. And 2, that they have not washed their feet. Now, that may seem bizarre to us, and just a little bit childish because it is. But let me put some cultural framework about what's actually going on here. You see, the first bit of it is the disciples are having an argument not unlike what we just had. They're arguing about who is the greatest. They're not arguing about who gets to sit in the armchair and who has to sit on the bar stool. They're wanting to know who is the greatest, but they're not arguing about whether that's Tony Stark or Brett Valentine. I mean, Captain America. I'm sorry, I blew your cover, okay? They are arguing about which one of them is the greatest. You've got John over there going, I am Jesus' favorite, so I deserve the seat of most importance. Where you sat at the table symbolized how important you were. It symbolized how great you were. So each one was making their argument. John was the favorite. Jesus says, no, you're not, so don't get ahead of yourself. Besides, even if you were, I am the people's champion. I am the rock, okay? And you have seen everything I have cooked for this meal. Some of you got that, some of you didn't. Maybe I'm a little old now. You don't know any of those references. But And then you have Thomas trying to sneak in and take his seat. And they're like, get out of here. Doubters have to sit somewhere else. You are not that important. They chase everybody off. Okay, bad Bible humor. Does the same thing. They're arguing about who is the greatest. And while it may seem this is a weird time to be, how do y'all say it, flexing on each other? Am I using that term right? My Gen Z is not very fluent, okay? It seems a weird time to be doing that, but there's another reason. One that my dad would be very familiar with. My dad grew up in a family of 6 children. So meals were a big deal, as was cleaning up. So every day, they would play a game of Sorry, if you've ever played the board game. And they are all cutthroat Sorry players now because of this. Because the winner, they didn't have to do any chores. The loser, they're doing the dishes for 8 people by their onesie, okay, all by themselves. So they get cutthroat in a hurry. Remember the bit where I said that Jesus also noticed that they hadn't washed their feet? I need a volunteer from somewhere over here. Saying I used you the last time. Jensen, come up here, okay? Take your shoes off. We don't need them up here. Okay? And we may all regret what is about to happen. I apologize. But you see, back in the day, we're familiar with the concept of washing our hands, particularly in this season. But back in the day, everybody had to wash their feet. Hold on. Everyone had to wash their feet before they came in. Okay? And typically, if you were a rich person, you had a servant that would wash your feet. But there ain't no rich people here tonight. Not at the dining hall. They're not at a rich person's house. So the person that's least important is expected to wash everyone's feet. And Jensen's an athlete, so I'm sure you've been out, and I'm sure they smell absolutely beautiful. But it can get worse, if you would so kindly step in the sand here so we get a little more accurate of representation. Just get them all dirty and wiggled in there. Don't fall, please. That'll be even more entertaining. Back in the day, they all wore closed-toed shoes or open-toed shoes. They all walked around. They walked around on streets that were not clean. You can step out and grab a seat if you would. They walked around on streets that were dusty, dirty, and I'm not quite sure what Simon number 2 stepped in over there, but I know that I ain't doing it. They are all trying to dodge the job of cleaning this. So Jesus, though, he sees this, and he goes and he changes his clothes, and he comes out with a towel. And Jesus, the person of most importance in the room to them, they literally just watch this guy come into Jerusalem as a king. They believe that he is a king. The one person who should never have to do this comes in, if you would so kindly, and begins to clean their feet, okay? Okay? They are stunned into silence. The argument ends immediately. Simon Peter is so offended and so ashamed that he almost refuses to let Jesus wash his feet. And then once he's done, once Jesus is finished, it says that he goes and changes clothes. He sits back down at the table. And he says, "Do you understand what I have done for you?" He asks them, "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash another's feet. I've set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you have these things, now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. The kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors. But you are not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves. For who is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who is at the table? But I am among you as one who serves. Grab a seat. Thank you for letting me borrow you. Please, a round of applause for Jensen here real quick. His feet weren't that nasty. You see, the disciples were still living in a mindset that the world struggles with even to this day, where might makes right, where history is written by the victor, and where the person with the microphone is the most important. But that's not what Jesus brings them to. Their privileges, their blessings, their strengths, their microphones. We live in a world that believes that it's our gifts, your talents, your privileges, your blessings, and your strengths that they make you superior. This is what we believe. They make you superior, that they make you capable of ruling. But Jesus comes forward and says that that strength does not make you capable of ruling. What it does is it makes you capable of service. That to serve others is how you love people like Jesus. When we serve sacrificially is when we are loving people like Jesus does. So how do we do this? Sacrificial serving is more than just holding doors open for people. It's more than even coming and serving at church. Both those things are both good to do, but that's not where it begins. Sacrificial service, loving people like Jesus, begins as a posture. All of the disciples were too proud to go and wash each other's feet. They weren't willing to give up their spot, their position, to see to the needs of someone else. But Jesus came in and he knelt to wash their feet. C.S. Lewis, he's a very amazing author and theologian. If you ever want something to read, both fiction and nonfiction, I recommend him. But he once said that it is a good thing, it's good for us, that God was not proud. It is a good thing for us that he stoops to conquer. That he came down to meet us where we're at. We love people like Jesus when we serve them where they're at, when we meet them where they are at. When we listen to them when they're hurting, when we listen to them when they're angry, when we listen to them when they're offended, when we try to understand where they're at. And it's when we comfort them when they're mourning, when they're sad. It's when we shelter them when they're afraid. It's when we show them kindness and when they're rude to us instead. When we're willing to serve people that disagree with us. And this posture is not about pleasing people. Jesus couldn't please 12. 2 of the guys whose feet he washed, one of them would go off minutes later to go betray him and have him and be the reason that he was led to the cross and crucified, and the other one would deny him 3 times. He doesn't do it because they deserve it. He loves people because they didn't deserve it. He gave up. He took his strength. He gave up his spot at the table to lend it to others. So why am I on this? Many of you have heard me say it, and I'm going to say it again, and you'll hear it said 1,000 times from now. That winter is coming, and when it gets here, there'll be no shortage of hard people, but good ones will be in high demand. And I'm not here to be doom and gloom or cause alarm, but winter is here. And I know you're thinking it's like 2 degrees short of like hell outside because it's hot. It's midsummer, for crying out loud, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about physical seasons. I'm talking about spiritual ones. When the days get dark, when fear fills the night. I'm talking about when people grow cold and their hearts become hard. And hard people, they're survivors. They're strong. And they're also selfish. They'll make it through physically. They may not be alive on the other side of it inwardly. Because you can be breathing and not be alive. You can just because you have a pulse doesn't mean that you have a heart. Hard people get caught up so fast in trying to save their own lives just to lose it. They forget that the greatest tragedy is not that we die. The greatest tragedy is that so few of us choose to actually live. Good people, on the other hand, realize that in order to find their lives, sometimes they have to give it on behalf of someone else. They realize that the light that is up inside of them is not simply to illuminate their own little world, but it's to be shared with people. It's meant to drive back the darkness when it shows up. They realize that their gifts, be they monetary, that their talents, be they physical or intellectual, they realize that their privileges, be they earned or be they inherited, are not meant for their own survival. They're meant to bring people along on the journey. Good people don't settle for surviving. They strive to thrive. And they realize they can't do that by themselves. Because life is not full if it's empty of people, if it's empty of meaning, if it's empty of love. And in order to love people like Jesus, we have to be willing to serve people with the strengths that we have been given. In order to love people like Jesus, we must be willing to stoop to conquer. I'm on this because I want you to have life to the full. I'm on this because the time that we're in is unpleasant, but it is an opportunity. It is an opportunity to step into something greater if we were willing to do it, if we are willing to serve people around us, to love them like Jesus, to be that hope that everyone so desperately needs, because that's shut up inside of you. But are we willing to share it? Harvest comes in summer, and we love to harvest the fruit of hope, the fruit of faith, the fruit of kindness. We like it when that's paid back. But the seeds for that fruit are sown in winter. They're sown when life is hard. And they only produce for people that are deciding and striving to be good, because they're the only people that want to be those things. Find people to serve. Go out of your way to do it, to love on people that don't deserve it, to meet people where they need it. That is what it means to love people like Jesus. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for tonight. We thank you for who you are. We thank you for the love that you have for us. And I pray that each of us would come before you and, one, accept that love, and two, to reflect that love to the world around us. Teach us how to love like you. Teach us what it feels like to love like you, to love someone the way that you do. Not only that we may find life to the full, but that they might as well. May we be willing to humble ourselves on someone else's behalf. In your Son's name I pray. Amen.